Hello everyone, welcome to Chapter 7. Chapter 7 we're going to be covering multiple regression. We're going to have two different videos in Chapter 7. This will be the first video. And what we're going to do, well, before I continue any further, at this point I'm going to assume you've read the chapter, and I'm going to assume you've read through this problem that I'm going to work through out of the book. And so that will save me some time in the video of explaining what the purpose of the problem is, but I'll still touch on it briefly. The idea here in a multiple regression is to use the data that we have to predict future situations. I know that's broad, but I'll explain in a little more detail. In this particular case, we have sales, which is our y, and we also have x1, variable 1, which is our number of cars, and x2, which is our number of locations. And the idea, what we want to achieve here, is that from this data we will come up with a regression equation. And what that regression equation will do is allow us to predict y in the future, so to predict sales if we have values for x1 and x2. So if in the future we know the number of cars and we know the number of locations, we can then predict sales somewhat accurately based on this data that we have here. So as you can see, I already have the data inputted here. This is directly from page 154 in your text. So if you're following along or typing along, now would be a good time to go ahead and get this data in there from the table on 154, on page 154 in your text. So go ahead and pause the video now and get the data entered, and then we will continue. Okay, I'm going to assume everybody has the data inputted at this point. It's at this point I also need to explain that, as in previous chapters, the Macintosh Excel for Mac does not have regression functionality built in. So we'll have to do that using an alternate approach. And I'm going to teach how to do the regression in Excel for Windows and Mac. And I'm going to teach it as if you haven't watched the previous videos. I'm not going to make that assumption just in case somebody didn't do an assignment or took a week off or something. So this way it should be fresh. So if I'm repeating things I've said in previous videos, that would be the reason why. So we're going to do it for Excel and Windows first, and then I'll show you a method to do it in Excel for Mac. Okay, so what we have here is a fairly simple multiple regression situation. And how we're going to solve this is we're going to go to Data, Data Analysis, and you should have that tool pack already installed. If you don't, please consult one of the previous videos. We're going to input our Y range, so I have Y range already selected there. I'm going to include labels because I think it makes the output a little more clear. We're going to have our input range, so that would be this group of numbers here, from B6 to C21. I've got labels selected. Our output range is going to be A25, which is what the book recommends, and so I'm going to be consistent with the book there. You could really put it anywhere. Then we're going to hit OK. And at this point we have all of our regression output. Now for this problem, all we're concerned about are these three cells. That gives us our regression equation. First thing I'm going to do is convert them to 2 decimal points for simplicity. There we have it. Now the rest of this is not covered in your book, the way I'm going to proceed through these next couple steps. The book shows you how to do the rest by hand, and I want you to know how to do it in Excel. So I'm going to put a few lines here that aren't absolutely necessary, but I like to include them for clarity. So in cell A45, I'm going to put our regression equation in its rawest form. So y equals a plus b1 times x1 plus b2 times x2. Okay, so that just gives me the equation, and that's the equation 7.2 there on page 159 in your book. Now I'm going to enter this equation with the new data numbers I have up there in cells B41 through B43. I'm going to enter it with those with our new data points. So y equals A, which is going to be 53.55, plus B1, which is 9.09, times X1, plus B2, which is negative. So since it's a negative, I'm going to go ahead and change that plus sign to a minus, 0.17 x2, times x2, I should say. Okay. Now, the problem that they've given us down in 7.3, it says the objective is to find the predicted annual sales for a rental car company that has 80,000 cars and 900 locations. Now, the data was given to us with thousands assumed. I'm going to scroll up to that so you could see that. Thousands, number of cars, thousands. So these would be 120,000, 180,000, etc. So 80 is the number I'm concerned with. And 900 locations. So I'm going to use those two numbers that they gave us to calculate predicted annual sales. So for that equation, I'm going to enter it in visually before I actually solve for it. Y equals 53.55 plus 9.09 times X1. And X1 I now know to be, since they gave it to me, is 80. Minus 0.17 times X2, which we now know is 900. Hit enter. The reason I know that X1 is 80 instead of 900, which is X1 and which is X2, we can simply look up here, and X1 is number of cars. And so the number of cars they gave us as a predictor is 80,000. Number of locations is X2, that's 900. So we already know which was X2 and which was X1. Now I'm going to enter that equation into Excel for real. And I'll show you a little shortcut to do that. We're just going to highlight everything except that Y. I'm going to copy it, hit enter, and then enter that into the formula line. This way I don't have to retype the whole thing. And hit enter and it'll solve for me. So 627.75 is my anticipated sales. Of course, the sales are in millions. I'm looking here at column Y. These are all in millions. So I know that my anticipated sales is 675.75 million, which I can do an easy conversion to. I'm going to go cell A48 times 1 million. Make sure you count your zeros correctly. And then just for good measure, since we're talking dollars, I'm going to convert it to currency. So that would be your answer as it lines up with the answer in the text. Now, for those of you, you can see the answer in the text on page 160. So for those of you on Macs, you have to do it a little bit of a different way. And I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to use an outside website to do the solution called, I guess you pronounce it Xuru, xuru.org, www.xuru.org. This is one of my favorite sites to do online calculations. I'm going to go here to Regression Tools, Multiple Linear Regression, click on that. And then you end up with this blank box. Well, luckily, it's pretty easy to enter things into that box. But there is one change to the data we need to make. So what I'm going to do here is the data cannot be entered with Y on the left followed by your X columns. It actually has to be your X columns with the Y over here. So I'm simply going to take this column, this is for you Mac users only, copy, well PC users could solve this way as well if they wanted, and copy it over here to that column. Okay, so I have the data over here. This puts it in the format I need. I'm now going to highlight this block of data and copy it. Go back to the website and paste it. It should look like that. And I'm going to hit calculate. And there is our regression equation. All right. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky. You can then take this and copy it back into Excel. I'm going to go down here below the work I've already done. And I'm going to copy that equation so I have what that website gave me. Now I've got my regression equation in Excel. Now the equation's a little bit different than the one I have up here. It gives me my x1 calculation first, then my x2 calculation, and then it gives me my a over here. So it just moved things around, but it's not really any different. The other difference is that it did not give me this number, this middle number, which is 0.17 in our regression calculation here. It gave me this as 1.66 times 10 to the negative 1. Now, it's at this point that you can enter things in, like, I mean, you can use that terminology, but you're going to need to know enough that that is actually equal to 10 to the minus 1. To convert that to a number you're more familiar with, you just move that decimal point one spot to the left. If it was 10 to the minus 2, you would move it 2 spots to the left. So that's what we're going to, at this point, we have this equation, and so we're going to go ahead and use the equation that the website gave us and enter in our variables 980 and solve. So we're going to go equals 9.09. I'm not going to enter the, I'm going to just do the rounding myself. Times x1, and what is x1? We already know that that's 80. Minus 1, I'm sorry. We could go 1.66 times 10 to the negative 1. I'm going to go ahead and do that conversion in my head, which is just sliding that x decimal point one spot to the left, which is 0.17, or I'm sorry, 1.66. 0.16 or 0.17, we know from the up above how to round it, so I'm just going to go ahead and put the 0.17 because that's how you get it to 2 decimal places. Minus 0.17 times 900, and then we're going to add that to 53.55. Hit enter, and there's that same 627 number. So multiply it by 1,000,000 to get 627 million in sales. So those are 2 ways to solve it. When you solve these problems and submit them, if you're on a Mac, I would like to see the equation you got from the website here. Instead of just giving me an equation with the answer, go ahead and let me see it in some place like this. That way, if you make a mistake converting, if they give you an exponent over here, I can see what you originally pulled down. Now, going back to the website, there are a lot of websites that are regression calculators. So if you don't particularly like this one and want to Google search another one, you're welcome to do that. And here is, it gives you a little bit more information, and put the data you inputted into a chart here so you can see what it looked like in a chart. It does a pretty nice, simple job of calculating the correct answer. Okay, I believe we have completed this section of what I wanted to accomplish for this first video, so we're going to go ahead and stop the video there and pick up with Chapter 7 Part 2 video next.